You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name's Albert Padilla, and this is episode 336, The Mandalorian, The Child. So this is chapter 2 of The Mandalorian. We are doing a retrospective look at all of the episodes since we didn't really get a chance to do so back in the fall, and kind of wax in perspective, talk about potential season 2 stuff as we go through this, which as we get closer to the end of the series, we'll do more and more of that. So we didn't really get a chance to dive into it. I've got some stuff to poke at tonight, so we will get into that. And to help me do all of this is going to be none other than Mr. Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome back to the show, sir. How are you doing tonight?
Doing great, man. How are you?
I am excellent. I am ready to talk about The Mandalorian. I forgot how much I really like this show. Like, it's been fun going back and just rewatching these episodes, and I've seen them a billion times, but I'm not bored of them yet.
Right. Yeah, each one, I mean, every time you watch it, you pick something else up, or you catch a different style. And actually, I noticed that right when the opening sequence came up when I watched it again this week. And
yeah,
that's a lot of fun when you can do that.
It's so, and I mean, I want to kind of break this down. We'll talk about kind of the bigger moments. We'll break down every single thing, although it's really not that long of an episode. So but let's just get into this. So this is chapter 2. It was directed by Rick Famuyiwa, who honestly I'd never seen anything. Let me just pause real quick. So I want to talk about him just briefly. He ends up, I think, doing a total of 2 episodes, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so.
And yeah, so you couple the episodes themselves, the behind the scenes stuff that's on The Mandalorian that they've got on Disney Plus. They've got that whole series, right? I really like this guy. And I'm like, last night, I was going through all of his movies that he'd done just to kind of see what he did. But we'll break this down yet. But had you heard of him before? I mean, we talked about him loosely, I think, before the season started. But how much were you aware of his style and what he did and kind of what he was bringing to the table?
Actually, I had the same with a couple of the directors. I just didn't know much about him. I had to go and do a little bit of research to see what they had done. And you bring it up now, and it's been a while since I've looked at his biography, I guess, if you would call it. But no, I didn't really know I didn't know who he was either, or what his style was, or what they were bringing to the table. I like the diversity of what they brought into it, but but it's really cool to see the unique styles of each one when they bring it up.
Yeah, and so he does a movie called Brown Sugar, which isn't kind of a movie that I would really normally watch, but yeah, and I've heard of it, heard a lot of good things about it. But yeah, I'm really tempted now. If I find some time this week to squeeze that in, I definitely will. And the reason I bring this up is because I want to just start it with the intro, because coming off of the very first episode, and we've got Dave Filoni doing his live action directorial debut. We had both of these stories are done by Jon Favreau, so we're consistent there. But it was a little bit of a change, and again, that's not feedback to Dave Filoni, but from the beginning, the way this opening scene starts, right, with the Mandalorian walking with the baby, the lighting, the use of like shadows, the music that's playing, that's going on there, that's in the background, the camera work, even the CGI. I mean, and this is I think this is one of the awards that they got. They picked up a sound editing reward. So you think about just the sound alone, and I said, okay, let me play this back. I'll close my eyes, just focus in on the sound effects. And yeah, I can see where they did a really good job. I mean, there's so much just little things you hear throughout all this episode. And I would say most of the series is like this, but this one in particular, for whatever reason, maybe it's just in my head because he got the nomination, but there were a lot of things that were working in this opening scene of him walking with the child and then being attacked by the Trandoshans.
Right. And no dialogue for quite a while in this episode, which I thought was fantastic. And I was trying to count, like, how long did this go for? And it was almost half the episode, something like that, right?
Yes.
Of no dialogue for it, and which I thought was perfect, because you don't need to. You get the sound. I mean, you have people grunting and whatnot, but no actual words spoken, which I thought was a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm with you. All of the lighting and the shadows that they had just added a lot to it. And, especially when he pauses and you see the shadow kind of run behind along the rocks. Just great imagery of something's about to happen. And just that little, you already knew something was going to happen, but then you actually get that visual representation of something's about to go down.
Yeah.
And just little things like that add to it. You don't have to throw it in someone's face. You can just be a little subtle and then get right into it.
Right. And one of the other things too is seeing the Trandoshans, because prior to this, I mean, okay, so we had Clone Wars. They were in there. I'm not saying they weren't, but live action. I mean, this is apart from Bosk. I'm trying to think, were there ever any that we saw beyond this? And not only did we get, we got more than one. We got 3, and they're attacking the Mandalorian. I thought the cinematography was great. The choreography was great, and the fight sequences and the way he was even the way he just, like, you watch it, he unholsters his rifle off his back, and he does that in one sweeping motion that ends up blocking one of the attacks of the Trandoshan. So, I mean, kudos to whoever choreographed this stuff, but it was from some pretty slick stuff that we saw here, and just being able to see 3 of the species again for the first time live action, I thought was really great too.
Right. I mean, and you get this idea that the Mandalorian's kind of a badass too. 3 on 1, and those odds are okay. I mean, kind of like what he did in the opening episode. Yeah, when he took the job, and now you get to see, he's legit. But yeah, the fight choreography was good, because often what you'll see in some of these fights is you'll see where they pull back, or where they hold it. They hold a position because they know they're going to get hit, and there's just too much thought going on during it. And this one was very natural, I think, to your point of, the sweeping motions. They were all natural. It didn't seem like someone was waiting to get into the fight, because you can only do so many things at one time. And I thought it was just, it was really well done, and it just really seamless the way that they assembled it. It was really good.
And so
thanks, Heath.
Yeah, nice shirt. I got the Force Awakens. No, so when the other thing that was like, so this is I guess one of the Easter eggs was, and we see this later on, it's almost gratuitous later on, but the disintegration. Okay, so this scene really, I could spend like 15 minutes talking about just the opening scene, because I really do like it that much. But it's 2 primary things. One, or there's more than that, but probably 3 primary things. One, it's our first moments with the child. So we got the child at the very end. Obviously, that was a big cliffhanger. We were all left to kind of speculate for that week, which was torturous, or for however long it was before this episode premiered. So there was a lot of speculation there. But this was our first moment of actually seeing the child, and it felt like my eyes were just drawn to him every single time. And this is something that stayed with the series. Anytime he's on the screen, I mean, he just demands your attention, because you just want to know what he's going to do next, or how he's going to act, or if he'll ever say anything, outside of his little goos and stuff like that. But then the other thing was, we got the disintegration, which I can't recall, again, remember seeing anywhere before. But to see from a Mandalorian, and to see him explode that way, I mean, that's a kind of a first big Easter egg. And again, later on, we're going to get a lot of that. But I was not expecting that. I wasn't expecting a disintegration to look like that. In fact, I'll say this. In Empire Strikes Back, at least from a canon perspective, because I know in Legends, this probably, it did happen. I know in some of the comic books, but I always thought no disintegrations was just kind of like, hey, don't kill the guy. I never took it as a literal sense. And then seeing him blow this one up, and then the Jawas later on, I mean, it's pretty powerful, and just really gets you excited for what was coming up next.
I remember the very first time I watched this episode, and that happened, and I just had one of those like, holy, word you can't say on TV.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I literally said it out loud too, because it was just, you finally saw it, and you're like, yeah, it's a thing. So Vader knew what he was doing, what he was talking about.
Right. Yeah.
But it was great. And I want to come back to this though with the Jawas, because I do have a silly question, but I'll save it for when we actually get to the Jawa sequence. Something I would like to go back though. So when at the very beginning, you were talking about the cinematography, when they're walking through and you get all this side, it really captured the essence of, I thought, A New Hope with R2 going through the canyon. It was very reminiscent. And some of the shots, they weren't like for like, but they were very similar to where you got the same feel of when he was looking around, and you see, the thing, like these had the little, dragon type of deals running in and out. But whereas we had Jawas in A New Hope that was doing that in episode 4. And I just like the parallels that we got from that. And it really helped, again, we were talking, what's Star Warsy and things like that. I think these types of moments capture those essences. And you can also see kind of the fanboy and fangirl side of the directors coming out a bit too, where they, just pay a little bit of an homage to, to what's come before them, and respecting of the material of what George Lucas has done and everybody else that's contributed, in the past.
Yeah. I got a question. So you brought it up, and I'm going to tag on it just a little bit, because I know we're still not even like 3 minutes into this episode, but there was something about like, the little lizards, right? Mm-hmm. They started popping up. They're kind of curious, that kind of thing. But then they started following him, and I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but the way I pictured this, or I guess in my own head, is because the child is so force sensitive about life. These things are just natural. It's almost like a Disney princess, right? They just flock and congregate because they're so good and so pure, and there's something magical about them. And that's the kind of sense that I was getting, is because if you watch, they start gathering. There's more and more and more, and you could just say, "Oh, they're just curious," and sometimes they do that. But I would say that I don't think that was the case, and I think it was primarily because the child was there. And I hope that's the case, because I think that says a lot about him and the mysticism of the Force and life beings drawn to it in that way. And then as soon as the Trandoshans get near, they all kind of scatter and go about their own way.
Yeah, I could get there with you. I don't have any problems with that. I thought they were curious.
I threw the Disney princess in there for you, man. So I was hoping that you would be like, yes, that's exactly great reference here. But.
I just thought they were curious. I mean, they don't get many visitors in that neck of town or that area of town. So they were just curious. But no, I'm with you. I think it's an interesting concept of some people just emanate this life force around them, and then people are just drawn to them, much like you. We're just drawn to you. And Mike,
thank you.
Mike Rondo is the opposite effect.
Who's joining us tonight? So there we go. There's our one free shot there at Mr. Rondo. All right, well, let's move on from the opening sequence. And obviously the Mandalorian gets injured. The next scene is kind of him sitting down and he's doing his repairs. And
what kind of tool was that?
I don't know. Yeah, it's some kind of field dressing is what he was, or field wound dressing is what it looked like he was doing. So it looked painful, which
you heard him grunt. Yeah,
and
it was very subtle, but you could hear it.
And a lot of times, I think in Star Wars, at least from again legends and stuff, I don't remember a lot of people going through pain. I mean, you had Vader, or Anakin. That's a different story. But a lot of times there was stuff that they would put on there first, like their Bacta, or what was the other one before that, Koltov, or whatever it is from the Old Republic. A lot of that stuff had like numbing agents and stuff, so the pain wasn't there. But he was going through some severe pain. So it almost feels like, I don't know if that thing was just barbaric, if it truly was kind of a field type thing and really wasn't meant to be, a full on hospital and it's just to get the job done kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, it was cool because he's doing repairs on himself and his armor. Right. And this leads right into our first indication that maybe there's something going, that the child, Baby Yoda, is Force sensitive, because he's coming up and trying to kind of heal him. And again, this would play out later down the road when we get to Grief Karga and when he's hurt, right? But yeah, so just give me some thoughts there, and then I've got a question kind of just in general about the child and what we can maybe expect in season 2.
Yeah, what was the question?
No question. Just any opening thoughts here about him doing the repairs and
so I like that we got to see a field dressing type of thing, and I'm guessing it was some sort of cauterizing gun or thing like that. He was trying to get it to stop bleeding or whatever it was. But I thought it was good. I mean, when we also got to start, we get a couple examples of this and of seeing what the armor consists of, and it was interesting that there were electronics and stuff in it, which makes a lot of sense, although you don't really expect that in a breastplate.
Right.
But, right. Yeah. But you can see, but you can at least see that, there are all these things that are routing through the helmet and whatnot. They all play a part, and this is how he can, control everything that he's got on his wrists or wherever else. And of course, we're going to see that in later episodes as well, with some of the new weapons he acquires. But I thought it was good though. And again, it was one of those moments of when the child comes up and you're like, are we really going here? Like, are we actually going to go and bring Force stuff into this show?
Yeah.
Because again, at the time, and we talked a little bit about this last week, we had no expectations that there would be Force anything in this.
Right.
There would be no Jedi. There would be no Sith. There would be this was just going to be a down and dirty Western type of show. And we wouldn't have any of those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that we started flirting with it here was like, oh, okay. Is it a little too on the nose, I guess, especially with the same species as Yoda?
Yeah.
And asking that question of like, okay, if this is a thing, is it everybody in this species, or is it just happenstance that the same species, like they're all Force sensitive? This is the third one we've seen, and they all have some ability. But I just like it was a lot of questions rolling through your head of whether or not they were actually going to go this route. And I got to be honest, I did not expect them to resolve that in this episode as well. So, which we'll get to later on, but I had no expectations they would resolve that in this one. I was surprised they did.
You mean just the fact that he was Force sensitive? Or
that they showed it and confirmed it.
Yeah,
because
right.
we had, how often do you see that done? I mean, I know they only had eight episodes, but how often do you see them tease you and then actually show you in the same show, in the same episode? It's so rare.
No, I agree. So from here we get to, and the other thing too, and we won't dive into this too much, but all the transition scenes are awesome. Like in this episode particularly, there's that shot where they're just kind of standing there and you can kind of see that they're almost against the, the horizon in some ways, and they're kind of going in, he's fading in and out. Again, just great stuff.
Right.
coming here from the director. The
And
so,
in the music too. I mean, you touched on this a little bit, but some of the music really, really works in these scenes, including the lack of any music.
mhm.
I think when it's just them, I don't remember any music, or it was so subtle that you just don't notice it,
Yeah.
which I
No,
think is perfect for those types of moments.
yeah, that's a great point. And that's again something that continues throughout the season. There's plenty of episodes where when the music's there, it's great, and when there doesn't need to be music, it's not there, and it's significant. It's powerful to
Right.
not have it. Right, it doesn't focus, so you're not focused on that or in any way. Um, all right, let's talk about your favorite topic. We're going to talk about Jawas because when he finally makes it back to the Razor Crest, and the Jawas are kind of tearing apart his ship, and he does that cool little thing where he pulls off the little scope and kind of uses that to look through.
Mhm.
Which I always thought, why would you take that off? Just use the scope on the rifle and then just fire away if you need to. But and then so then we get into all the disintegrations at that point. He is just picking these off. I mean, left and right. I think somebody was it Gary? Yeah, Gary Smith. Jawas pop like soap bubbles from his pulse rifle, and that's exactly what was happening.
Perfect.
And I don't know, it was cool because you could tell the Jawas had no idea where this was coming from, right? It's like one of these typical scenarios where you've got a sniper somewhere, these things are blowing up, and they're just kind of firing. In fact, I think either the second or third Jawa is just kind of like looking around,
Right.
blasting whatever he can in hopes it'll hit something, and he gets popped as well. But
Okay. So now my silly question.
all right, go ahead, give me the silly.
So he shoots them,
Yeah,
and they disintegrate, but the cloak is left
close.
behind, and
Yeah,
the fob was left behind with the Trandoshans. So why is it just the fleshy stuff that is affected by the disintegration rifle, or is this just to make sure that you knew that there used to be something there?
and I
Now,
think it's the second, but my headcanon is that they are one with the Force now. Like I think,
oh
no,
my
I'm kidding.
god,
No, I'm kidding. No, you asked, so I give it to you. No, I don't. I think it's really just it's a visual cue to let you know that they're gone. I think it's more. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's really a matter of opinion. You could say showing it just disintegrating into nothing is powerful, right? Less with more, or more with less, I should say. But then seeing that robe fall, there's something very satisfying about it. Like
yeah,
there's nothing in this anymore. It's completely gone, save the clothing. So, yeah, I think maybe it's just a
yeah,
style thing.
visually, it's more appealing this way. I don't dispute that at all, but it was
Yeah,
just one of those. You're disintegrating something, but you're leaving a lot behind, like quite clearly.
yeah. And
Midichlorian bullets from CJ Manuel there.
Midichlorian Buddha.
That's great.
Oh, that's great. Good one.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
for those that are just listening to the podcast, we do a live stream as well, that we're doing this, and so we've got live comments coming in on us. So we'll
Yeah.
try to continue making context of it if you're just listening to the audio side.
I was surprised too about the child. Like he looks like when that first shot goes off, he's like shocked. Dude. Like he like leans forward and his eyes get really big, almost like what's happening here. And I
Right.
thought for sure he would like maybe intervene. And he keeps looking over at the Mandalorian, like, what are you doing? He's like, this is something all new to him that,
Right.
either he's never seen it before or at least he wasn't expecting it from the Mandalorian, which, maybe he doesn't put two and two together. That's a ship and they're tearing it apart and he wants to make sure it doesn't go
Right.
any worse. But uh, so the Jawas. One other thing about them. So these are considered off-world Jawas. I don't remember when we talked about this. This may have been one of the shows that we did speak about on the main show at one point. But the idea that there's off-world Jawas, I don't really have a problem with. I know some people did. They've got darker robes, and the only thing I had a hook up or hang up on was the sandcrawler. Because I
Mm.
thought the original Jawas had overtaken the sandcrawlers for mining. I mean, the sandcrawler is nothing that, at least from what I remember, and I think this was canonized at one point, but the sandcrawlers were things that were left over from mining companies, and the Jawas just took them over, did whatever they did, modded them out, and then used them as their kind of rolling bases.
Right.
And the idea that an off-world Jawa now, you know, I don't know, thousands, millions of miles away, they have a sandcrawler too. I get, okay, you've got to be able to show that, oh, they're Jawas. This is what you're used to seeing because of A New Hope.
Right.
But I don't know. And the sandcrawler, and one last thing, the sandcrawler does look like it's been made to accommodate them. So when the Mandalorian's in there later on, he's like
Yeah.
all hunched over.
Right.
So maybe they've changed it. Maybe they've changed it now so that these guys, or maybe the Jawas took over the technology and they've now making their own and they're cranking these things out and they're just, adjusting them to their heights or whatever.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think it was just we know why it's there, but to try to go and justify it in the kind of the Star Wars way of thinking, it's kind of tough. That I mean, it makes sense that they would have a preferred vehicle, I suppose, but also means that they
Mhm.
mass produce these and you can find them rather easily and frequently and not have to work all that hard at it. Whereas I remember growing up, I thought the Sandcrawler was just kind of a unique one thing of where this was the vehicle that they used and for that group of them on that planet, all of that, to where it was unique for that place because they needed it for the terrain and all these other things, rather than this is the preferred vehicle of all of them, no matter where they're at.
Right.
So, but I did like it, and I like that we got to see aspects of the Sandcrawler that we hadn't seen before.
Yes.
Popping out the sides and things like that, and we also got to see Jawa junk, which is fun.
Yeah,
that sounds really bad. Throwing junk out there. So.
Yeah. Brick Public clones. The Sandcrawlers, they fly now. Yeah, that's how they got there. Maybe they do. Maybe they've modded them out to the point where they have intergalactic space travel abilities. So the Mandalorian pops off a few of these guys, no pun intended, and then he takes a shot at the back of the Sandcrawler, and I guess it says two things here. One, I don't know if he was because he purposely it shows him zoom in, I think, or whatever, and he fires off at that one thing. Was this to disable the Sandcrawler in some way, and how would he know about the technology?
I imagine if you've got any kind of engineering or parts of cars and whatnot, you've got a basic idea of what they operate and how to disable them, or what's going to make it take damage to actually make it something that you could catch up to, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's what I attribute to, and it goes back to also the disintegration. He shoots it, clearly nothing disintegrates, right? It just damages it.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of seems like the rifle is custom for the fleshies.
Yeah. That whole sequence you mentioned where he's, he finally gets onto the Sandcrawler and they try to scrape him off the side of the wall. That reminded me a lot of
Indiana Jones.
Yes, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, right? And so I don't know if I've never seen anything where that was kind of an homage, but that was kind of cool. And then obviously when he's scaling that wall, when he's climbing it, it's very reminiscent of Luke hanging off the side of the sail barge, waiting and pulling people out and doing that. And then when he uses his little cable and starts scaling it, I was getting flashbacks of the old 60s Batman where he was climbing up the thing. So there was a lot of just tributes here that I was going through, and all this was very familiar. And but yeah, I mean, I thought it was a great action sequence, and I love the fact that they one of those little Jawas, he throws him down, that little poor dude just falls, hopefully to his death. But it was pretty cool. I really enjoyed that whole sequence. And again, this is all great stuff coming, from Mr. Rick there on as a director.
Well, and when he gets to the top, you can't help but laugh, because when he gets there, he sees all these Jawas pull their guns. Just one of those oh crap moments.
It's almost like Han in episode 4 when he goes around the corner and there's all the stormtroopers kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And when they shoot him, I still laugh at that sequence, of that little moment of he's like, uh-oh.
Yep.
And then they
get myself into.
Yeah. And then somehow he doesn't have a problem surviving, but.
So,
lucky.
Yeah. So he kind of obviously gets shocked, falls down, gives up, heads back to kind of lick his wounds, see how much damage there is. And this thing's been completely dismantled at this point. And we get I guess, he ends up going back, really the only person that he knows that can even help him out at this point, which is Kuiil, because he can't fly off the planet. He has no one else to go to. And they have a great line. There's a great exchange there. He says, "Where I thought you were dead." And, what did you think about meeting? I guess, were you expecting to have, I mean, I don't know if he saw who was in it and all that. Maybe that was spoiled, but I honestly didn't know that we would be coming back to Kuiil this soon, or at all, really, to be honest, the way the first episode ended.
Yeah, it was a bit of a surprise, but it makes a lot of sense, especially now that we've seen the rest of the episodes, what they wanted to do with the character. And I was glad, because we got to see we got to explore more of him. And we talked a little bit about that last week. We didn't really get a whole lot of backstory or time with him to learn more about what his situation was and why he was there and what his past and things about what made him tick a bit. Mm-hmm. I thought this episode did a fantastic job of that, where we get a lot more of that, rather than him beating the guy over the head to learn to ride a animal. So, but I thought this was good. I agree. The exchanges that they have more than once in this episode were really, really fantastic and a lot of fun to watch. And especially the one where he's coming back after getting the egg.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't expect them to come back this soon to the character, but I'm glad they did. It made a lot of sense of why they would.
Yeah, and that line of I thought you were dead. I mean, he had already told the Mandalorian that everybody had tried to get the child and everybody died. So I really think he was just not expecting that, much less the Jawas or surviving, an assault, a single man assault on a Sandcrawler. Right. And then Kuiil, he offers to help him out. And I don't know, he doesn't really have to. right? I mean, he's already, the threat's been neutralized. I mean, again, in that first episode, he was just wanting somebody to go in there. He helped him out, obviously, to get him there and get rid of this child so that all these people could just finally leave and leave him to peace and he wouldn't have to worry about it. And that's been obviously accomplished because he sees the child, even questions it, but he still offers to help him out. So anything beyond just him being a good-natured person and wanting to help the Mandalorian, or maybe as a reward for a final reward for having, done, hopefully brought peace to his land?
Well, I think if he's stranded there, they're going to come. Others are going to come for it too, because it's not. So he's not secured. It's not peaceful yet.
Yeah.
So while he's taking care of one threat, the rest will descend, and they'll actually probably come in greater numbers now because they know what they're facing directly. The child was heavily fortified before, but now it's got a Mandalorian with it,
right,
who can disintegrate everything. So I mean, you tend to throw more resources at something like that, and to make sure that you get it in, especially with something that's going to pay as highly as this asset would.
Yep. And then that scene ends with, I thought was probably one of the funnier moments in the series, where the child eating that little frog, and he don't. And again, this is another one of these things where I feel like, again, can't confirm it, but I see him eat that frog, and I think Jar Jar Binks from episode 1, when he gets busted eating that whatever thing that was dangling there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess I wasn't expecting that, and that's a great. There's a lot of great moments with the baby later, throughout the series, but this is I think the very first one that we get.
Right.
Okay, so let's transition. So he ends up having to go back to the Jawas, and this whole sequence is just like some of the best stuff in just the dialogue, learning that Kuiil can speak with them, the Mandalorian can speak in some way, although they make fun of the way he speaks because he talks like a Wookiee. Right. We get him blowing his top immediately. Like, he really isn't, he doesn't want to leave his weapons. He has no patience with them. Immediately pulls out the flamethrower when things get a little testy, or they feels like they're kind of impeding on him, or, what he's wanting. It almost feels like he doesn't even feel like he needs to be going with this. Like, in his mind, I know he's thinking, they're all here. Let me just continue to kill them until they're all dead, and I'll just take my stuff. But he's abiding by Kuiil's, want here, and trying to find a peaceful solution and negotiate with them, even though that technically is their stuff and they shouldn't have it. So, I mean, I totally get where he's coming from, but this whole sequence is really great, and dialogue's really great here as well.
Well, it wasn't, especially, the weapons are part of his religion.
Yeah.
It's just a fantastic line that, again, just has so many different types of callbacks that you can reference with anything from Jedi and religion to, Tarkin, what he's saying and whatnot, back in A New Hope, to anything else. And so it was just a great moment of that. But yeah, it was really interesting, though, that you could see he didn't want to negotiate at all. He just wanted to take what was his and go back. And clearly there was a better way, but his tolerance for them was exceptionally low. And he was more than happy just to barbecue them all. But I mean, he's still outnumbered. And even though they're little, clearly they took care of business before.
Yeah.
But I do see this bit of respect, though, to Kuiil, like of respecting, this is his territory. He knows, clearly he's negotiated with them before, and knows how to work a deal. And, and he backs up the Mandalorian too, which I thought was probably, he knows he can't part with his armor. That's who they are. That's their identity. And that he would respect that. I think a bit of a two-way street. And I think the Mandalorian is starting to respect him anyway, of just what he's able to do and his value, I think, in general, as well as just his generosity towards him.
So they originally say they want his Beskar, which, he's not going to give up whatsoever, right? But it made me wonder, like, how much these Jawas knew the value of Beskar. Why would they want Beskar? Is it just strictly for dealing and trading later on, having something of more shinier object?
Yeah, I mean, Jawas are in it for the money, as far as I'm aware. And I was trying to remember, I was listening to some of the From a Certain Point of View stories not long ago, and there was a Jawa story in there, I believe. And they kind of give you a little background about what's important to the Jawas and what do they find valuable, and just whatever they could do. I mean, they're scavengers and they're looking for profit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it makes sense that, something that valuable, they don't come across it very often either. I mean, we see the rarity of it, and we get confirmation of that in episode 3, but it just kind of speaks to their character. It's just a kind of a one-track mind for them of, we want the things that are valuable, and,
right, that are shiny.
And quite honestly, Beskar, and there's a certain symbolism with the Beskar too, of, just where you're at in the food chain, I think, as well, and how unique you are and how special you are as a result.
So they eventually settle on the SOOKA, and I don't know if it's SOOKA or SOOKA. So I don't know if you're in the chat.
Sounds like a K.
So tell me if you think it's SOOKA or SOOGA. I'd like to know because I'm unsettled in terms of where I could go either way, but I'll go with whatever the popular opinion is. But they want an egg, and when they mention that, like Kuiil face palms, like he actually puts his face, like does literally does a face palm. And I was trying to think, like, why would he do that? Has he been down this road before? Does he know what that is? And he just thinking like, oh, this is not going to go well, or I can't believe them, or
Sure.
any thoughts around that is?
Well, yeah, I'm guessing they're obsessed over this stuff, and they're rare, and they probably ring it up every time they want something. Is kind of how I interpreted that. Of we're going to ask this again.
Yes, yeah, maybe he's been there, done this thing with them for some reason or for whatever reason. Okay,
he probably knows how dangerous it is too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So let's get into that. Let's get into the Mudhorn in the cave. I didn't know what to expect here, right? Just him walking in, that whole, again, the music is really great here. All the way up, even while he's fighting the Mudhorn, throughout all of that, the entire battle and that sort of thing. But the great moment, I think, for B is him getting ready, he's checking his armor, checking his weapons, and everything goes in. And I love the fact that they don't show him but fly out of the cave, and just the whole sequence itself and how he just gets completely brutalized and battered in all of this.
When you show, and his breastplate in general, it's completely bent out of shape. I mean, it's uncomfortable to even watch it, really. Just the assault that he takes from this animal. Yeah.
And it's scary. So here's the thing too about them, before we get into the actual battle, I guess one of the things I was thinking about too is like the Jawas, they're trusting. there's a lot of them, and maybe they just know it. They cannot do this. They couldn't do this if they wanted to, but somehow they're entrusting a Mandalorian who they bested while he was attacking the Sandcrawler, but they still tell him to go do it. So I don't know if it's like they really trust him, or it's like, you know what, we've got nothing to lose here. If he dies, we get to still walk away with his stuff. So fine. But it's interesting that they do charge a single person, and no one else could go. Like Kuiil didn't go. They didn't send any other Jawas. They literally sent him, and then he brings the baby, which I guess would make sense. I wouldn't leave my child alone if I was going to go do that. But it says a lot either about what they think of the Mandalorian, and maybe that class, that breed of a person, or again, maybe it's just they don't care, because again, if he dies, they get to keep all his stuff, and it's a win-win for them.
Yeah, exactly. It's a win-win, and they get something. And then Stargate Pioneer said this in the chat. The egg is rare for them. There probably aren't many. If we think of like a white rhino, or black rhino, whichever one it is. But anyway, there's just not many of them around, and so the eggs are probably rare, and their ability to get them is exceptionally difficult. And now why it was just him, I don't know why Kuiil didn't go. It's not Kuil's fight anyway. It's not his interest. So
that's fair.
It makes sense that it would just be the Mandalorian. And again, it makes total sense he brings the child with him, because the asset's exceptionally valuable, and he can't trust anybody. He doesn't trust anybody, rightfully so. He just met these people, but yeah.
And then right before he gets like bolted out of the cave, we hear the blast go off. Again, that's from freaking episode 4, when he's like, hey, could you give us a hand down here or up here? And they go up there, and you hear the blaster bolts go out, right out of episode 4. So that's kind of another Easter egg that I really enjoyed. The fight sequence itself, I thought was great. Like the choreography was great. The special effects are great. Like that thing looks realistic in a lot of ways, and it's not there. Maybe it is. I don't know. I've never actually seen anything they use any kind of practical effects. Knowing them, they probably did some kind of combination thereof. But it wasn't. It never took me out of the. Even when the child holds it up with the Force, I didn't really feel like that looked odd. And sometimes with TV series, that seems to be. It kind of gnaws at me a little bit, because I can see it and I'm like, okay, it's not that great. And really wish it was.
No, this was really well done. Of course, they had the budget to do it too.
Yeah, they did, and we got to see him use a lot of different weapons. Yeah, he tried to use the sniper, his rifle. That didn't work out. Right, he tried to use a flamethrower. He actually got a shot off with it, but it looked like it was impervious to flame in some way, or maybe it was wet, the mud, or maybe something there was protecting. We don't know, And then he did the mistake of using the what is it? I don't know what it's called, the cable, whatever that cable is that he had. And
cable
sure, but yeah, we got to see that. And Django had it as well, just kind of another Easter egg there, but. Nothing was working, and then finally, right before he dies, or right before he feels like he's got one last thing, he pulls out that vibro blade, which I know has been confirmed now. I think when this episode came out, we speculated whether, how did he kill him with a single shot? If it was a vibro blade, then it does some pretty serious damage because it vibrates really fast and all that. But he ends up killing the Mudhorn only after the child intervenes. And we'll come back to the force powers of the child here in just one second. But just any thoughts on things you enjoyed or what really stood out for you during that fight sequence?
It was a good fight sequence. I think the one thing that stood out though was he was basically he was ready to die. I mean, he was kind of holding the blade out directly in front of him, kind of a meditative state, just that acceptance of your fate. And this is the end of it, which I was a little off put by actually, because I always viewed the Mandalorians would just, fight to their last breath. And maybe he was just beaten up enough to where it was, this was the end of it and he couldn't take much more, or it was just a losing fight. But I don't know what that is, but it was that was a little off-putting because I just expected him just to go down swinging rather than just kind of take a knee and hold the blade up. And again, and the one-shot kill on the animal with a apparently small blade, until you get the context that it's possible because of this or that with the weapon, it's not really clear on that. So I think some people might not understand how that would be possible and kind of be taken out of that moment. But I think in general, I'm with you though. The effects of this were really, really good. Across the board, and just the mud and everything that's caking on the Mandalorian, it just worked really, really well. And again, the shocking moment, of course, when we actually see this happen, and the effects were really good to where it did not feel the animal stops, and so it's a great moment of like, why did it stop? And we had no idea until we flash back to the Mandalorian, and then flash back over, and we see it levitating.
Yeah. The signet being revealed to itself, and I wonder if there's something there like that signet when she says, has your signet been revealed or whatever, I wonder if that's like there's certain criteria that have to be met in order for you to have a signet bestowed upon you or acquire it. And maybe one of them is just that you are in peril, like you were about to die, you were literally on death's door, and somehow you came through. And I think maybe that's why later on she's like, well, it's both of your signets, both you and the child, because if the child helped out, it belongs to both of you now. Right. So maybe there's some significance there in terms of why it was important to show him get to the point where he was literally on death's door, completely battered, completely disoriented. He'd been tossed around left and right. So I would imagine he's not even in a right state of mind. But I agree with your point. He's got nothing left. And he knows he's probably just accepting it. This thing's going to impale him and it's over with. He's going to put his blade out, hopefully get one last cheap shot in before he dies. So so Baby Yoda, I'm going to call him Baby Yoda. Baby Yoda finally, what's that? Baby Yoda finally puts his hand out, levitates the Mudhorn, and we get to, obviously he's force sensitive. So in that moment, okay, he's force sensitive, confirmed. He has the power of levitation, confirmed. He knows that. But all through the series, there are other things that he does, and I won't talk about them right now, but just kind of looking ahead to season 2, we've seen him do a lot of things already, right? In a very short span of time, all things considered. Do you think it's possible that we've not seen we've just touched the surface in terms of what he knows how to do? And do you think that we're going to see even more force powers, either things that we're already familiar with or new force powers that we've not seen going forward, like into season 2?
That's a tough question because, how much do we want to see? Again, kind of go back to what we talked about a couple of times of, do we want to see a lot of this stuff? And I think it's good to be able to touch on it and see he's going to learn. If he's on screen a whole lot, I'm assuming it's a he.
True.
Then we don't really know, but I would assume that we will see force abilities in some respect. Maybe we'll see some new ones. That's entirely possible, or at the very least, we'll see variations of what we already know, and maybe it's like tweaks on it, which I think would be even more interesting. If we get some variation of something we already know, rather than not necessarily having to touch into something completely new. But will we see any of the things that Yoda demonstrated, like in Last Jedi, or things interacting with elements and things like that might be different as well. But I don't know that I need to see any more if we got it, but he's growing up, so you would expect things to manifest themselves.
I would, yeah, and I personally, I think we are gonna see more, because it seems like he keeps displaying the force power whenever he's needed most, and so he ends up being the savior that they never asked for. They don't realize that, and they do. I think at the very end they all come to appreciate what he can do, especially after the flamethrower thing, and then certainly with Grief Karga, that kind of turns him around completely and really makes him a believer, literally. So I do think we'll get to see more force powers. I don't know to what extent. I'm hoping we get to see new stuff because and I don't want to steal too much here, but him healing, we saw it here in this episode, at least the attempt to do it, and later on he actually does it. That was something we had never seen in canon. And then flash forward from the episode where he does heal Grief Karga. Flash forward a couple weeks and we got the Rise of Skywalker where we see that happen twice. And now that becomes a very significant thing. So I would like to see some of that stuff. And they could go, even though we're not going to get stuff that comes out in the future, I think there's a very good possibility that we'll see force powers displayed in The Mandalorian that, as we're reading The High Republic, they're still doing back then. And maybe that's been lost over time, but somehow he knows, right? So, yeah, I'm looking forward to. I'm kind of curious as to what they do and how much he does. And there's that open question of how long is Baby Yoda going to be around in this series, which we'll touch on later in a future episode. So,
right.
Okay. So I guess the key thing about him is this idea that he seems to pass out literally every time this happens.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a permanent thing. I think what they're trying to do is say, okay, they're weighing the fact that he's very young and it just takes a lot out of him. But as he gets older, becomes stronger with the Force, this is no longer a factor. But thoughts around that?
Exertion.
Yeah. Agreed.
I like that they're showing this, that it's got this strain, this ability it takes a lot out of you, and it's not something that you do, that you can just do whenever you want and not have to pay any kind of I don't know, if you play like online games like MMOs or anything like that, you have this idea of using energy up, and once you've used it, you can't use your special abilities. And so this is right up like a video game alley to me. You've got to save up the energy in order to use it and expend it later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that they have this though, that you can't just do it and then move on and, investigate the kid. He's going to sleep for 12 hours or 24 hours or whatever it is to have to recover. And I think that recovery time should be, shorter and shorter as he does this. And we see some of that, especially when he's, not treating Cara Dune very well. But
right. Yeah. Okay. So CJ Manuel says, do you think he'll talk by the end of season 2?
I'm guessing no.
No, I would say I can see him doing a one word kind of thing. Like
maybe
daddy. No, I'm kidding. That's for Mike. But I can see him doing like a one word, and maybe it'd be really sweet if his first words were like Cara, right? Like they have a special relationship and she's like the mother and he's like the father, but first word is mommy and he says Cara or whatever. I think that would be really sweet. He doesn't have to though. I mean, it's not what I'm looking for, but I would like to see him talk at some point. If he's going to stick around for, 2, 3, 4 seasons, I would like to hear him say something. I don't think he'll speak in full sentences. Right. But it seems like if he's running around with humans the entire time speaking basic or common, then yeah, I would imagine he's going to pick up something, right?
Right.
Who knows what that's going to be? I think it's going to be kind of funny when he does. So,
right.
All right. Just quickly, do Yodas have a gender? I think they do because we got Yaddle.
Yeah, and we know
she was
Yoda,
a girl.
yeah.
I mean, I can't. Yeah, because they talk about Yaddle as being a female, so I think they do. I think they have both female and males. So, yeah.
Oh, there we have confirmation that. Yeah, later on the scientist does call it a he.
Yep. All right, so the baby passes out and he ends up taking this egg back to the Jawas, and I mean this is his
expression is classic though. When they're the way that they're behaving when they get this thing, and he's like, ugh, just like disgusting.
Shakes his head.
Yeah.
That is a really gross sequence. Like it looks like it's just pure, like stocked with like Velveeta cheese or nacho cheese, like the stuff you'd pour over your, chips at the theater or something. But
not what you get at the gas station.
Exactly. That cheese that's been stewing for so long that it's turning more of like a hard orange than a light orange, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Yep.
That's exactly what's in there.
2-day-old cheese sauce.
And even the egg was disturbing. Like an egg, like thinking about a hairy egg. I mean, all of that is just really gross stuff, but I did enjoy that stuff. He gets back to the ship. They go through another great montage sequence. So this is like the second one, and there's plenty more in the series, which
this is a legit montage though.
Oh, why was the first one not legit?
Well, because this one, like they had the cutting of the sequences, like, the I don't know. It just seemed more, it was a little bit longer too.
Yeah.
And it was like just the music swelling and you see them working and
Baby Yoda still passed out. Just laying there.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the only part that I had kind of a problem with, though, in this episode, where A, they can do this all in one night, and then B, the ship looks cleaner than ever. It looks fantastic, and nothing's out of place. There's nothing wrong. It was like,
Well, here's something. I don't know that they did it in one night. Like I thought in the next
maybe.
is it next episode, or I'm trying to think. There was something that made me think, oh, that was actually longer than just a couple days. Like this was like a week thing. But I could be wrong there, and I'll have to go back and try to find my notes of what I wrote down. But I thought it was a little bit longer than that. And maybe
all the sequences were at night.
Oh, and that's what I'm saying. It doesn't help that everything that they showed was at night. So yeah, fair point.
So if it was over a few days, that would have been, that makes sense. But I don't know. Kuiil's a master, whatever, everything. So clearly. And again, his smart-ass comment was great. It might go faster if you help.
Right. So, yeah. And there's so many great moments with him, and it sucks that we're not going to see him again. I mean, I don't think they're not going to jump a shark and bring him in. Oh, sorry. I spoiled that one too. I know. I started this whole series by saying, oh, we're going to do this so that people can watch it with us. And I've already spoiled everything. So forget that. It's out the window. Okay. So the other significant moment that happens before we get to him flying off is once the ship's repaired, Mandalorian makes an offer to him. It's like, hey, I could use you. Again, parallels to episode 4, Han reaching out to Luke, or Han reaching out to Rey in the sequel trilogy saying, hey, you're a good shot, a good hand. We could use somebody like you. And he turns it down very politely and says, no, I mean, I've lived this life of servitude, or I've lived a life of servitude, and I am my own person. I want to be my own boss and ruler of my own destiny, that kind of thing. Right. It says he's honored. Were you expecting this though?
Well, I think we had some speculation that he was going to assemble the crew at some point, especially when we, get all the characters at once. We've seen, teasers and all of that with who they were going to bring in. So I was expecting him. I thought that it was going to be a yes, and he would go. So I did not expect him to refuse it, though.
Say no.
But the reasons he gave make a lot of sense. He's not. Although I didn't view it as servitude, but I got myself there pretty quickly. I get it. He's working for him. It's his ship. They're not partners.
You're right.
They're co-workers at that point, but he's clearly the supervisor. So it was a good sequence though. I liked the reasoning he gave, and I thought it was clean, and it really worked, and it speaks to the character. And again, it gives you just layers to the character that you wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah.
About what is important to him, what drives him, what is his purpose, or what does he view his purpose as now.
Yep. Yeah, and I would agree. I don't think I took it literally as a slave kind of thing, because he even says, I'll pay you handsomely for it. I mean, it's almost an awkward, it's an awkward proposal to, hey, do you want to be part of my team? It comes across the Mandalorian as like, I'll pay you if you come work for me kind of thing. And
right.
I think that some of that's a little bit lost, but all right. So the Mandalorian is kind of done. He fires up the engines. We got the final, I have spoken word in there again, and that would come back a little bit later, but the him firing up the thrusters, all that was great stuff. And finally we get the Baby Yoda waking up, and which was good, because I was at this point I'm thinking like, okay, so the entire time this scene's going on, I'm thinking, okay, what about the baby? What's going on? It's still passed out. And he did mention that it was alive, but it was unconscious or breathing or whatever it was.
Right.
And it finally ends with that shot of it just kind of taking off, which I think is very classic. It's another throwback to a lot of the stuff that we would see and expect in Star Wars. But that really kind of brings us to the very end. I want to get into some spoilers, but any kind of final thoughts on, we got the confirmation that that Baby Yoda is Force sensitive. We got confirmation that Kuiil is not a part of his crew. And now he's taking this bounty back. I guess we got a lot to expect here. But just any final thoughts on this? I guess this episode before we get into Easter eggs.
Yeah, when we're going into this one, when I started watching, I was like, man, I was telling a friend, I was like, I thought this was like one of my least favorite episodes of like the entire series. But when I watched it, I changed my opinion on that one. And I don't know that I have a least favorite, but there were just so many little things that you need as you go through the series that you have to have. And this episode really does a lot of that. And again, I think the moments with Kuiil really, and the jawas, I think were, the jawas seemed like a throwaway sequence at the time, but it was really like, I just like the layering that we have with the things that we know, things we're familiar with, and then learning more about Kuiil and the character that he is. And I thought those moments I think the voice acting from Nick Nolte is, spot on and perfect, and it sounds great.
Yeah.
But I think that's what it really adds to the different characters, and just this, multi-layer, just a lot more to it now than what we had. And especially as we go throughout the series, and we can pull on some of this stuff as we go on.
Yep. Yeah, I would agree. And for me, I've actually enjoyed this episode way more than I saw. when I saw it the first time, I felt like, okay, this was a better episode than the first episode. But over time, I've really enjoyed this episode a lot more, and I find myself going back to it and watching it just for a lot of the reasons I said up front. I won't repeat all those reasons, but for a lot of the reasons that I said up front, I kind of come back to it. So I really do like this one a lot. The Easter eggs, I think we've covered all of them. I think the only one that we haven't really spoke about, and we've kind of talked around it and talked about it, but not necessarily called it out. And it's really just in this episode, we get more of what we saw in the first one with the use of a lot of the alien species, right? We got the Trandoshans, we've seen those before. We got Jawas, we've got Ugnaughts. In the first episode, we had like Quarrens and Kubazes and all that. But I think it's been a great use so far of bringing a lot of familiar aliens into the Mandalorian, so that it feels natural without being like I think the sequel trilogy tried to do this at times, but at times it did feel like the sequel trilogy was really throwing a lot of new characters or a lot of new alien species that we've never seen and never heard of, which are really cool because it gives people something to build later down the road. But it always felt like I always felt a little bit displaced with some of the aliens because I'm like not familiar. I'm like, where are all the ones that I'm used to seeing? And there was a lot of negative feedback when The Force Awakens came out, even The Last Jedi. Yet there was not enough familiar faces, if you will. But I thought this series has done a really good job of introducing more common ones, alien races that we're more familiar with, than really throwing us a lot of brand new aliens and having for us to try to figure out who they are and give them names and all that.
Yeah, it's a certain amount of familiarity, and I think that helps. It brings the world together for you, and you don't have to. You're not. We always want to work so hard to recreate the cantina scene in episode 4.
Yeah,
I think just the variety and just the interesting things and what's in this dark corner and what did I see here and what's this guy's story and what's this, what's the Zahn sister story, all these other different things, and I think some of it is just like when you have the familiarity of you recognize some things and you have other new things involved in that and interspersed. I think that's important to still have, but you don't lose it and it just feels comfortable. And you don't have to think overly hard to get through it. Or while it's fun to go and pick those apart, I'm not talking ill about that. It's just this, you just feel, I don't know, you're just comfortable. I can't think of a better word.
No,
you're just
yeah,
kind of comfortable with the scene. Yeah.
Yep, I would agree. There's just something about it that resonates. And I think that, again, that's part of the popularity. Why I think this show resonates with so many people is there are a lot of things that are callbacks to previous episodes without feeling like it's fan service. And I guess that's the thing. I mean, there are moments, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of moments where I felt like this series is a fan service series, which I'm okay with. I don't care. I'm fine with fan service. I actually enjoy that. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Right. But there are a lot of moments that are very subtle, and the way the approach that they take to present those, I think, is done very tactfully by everybody there. And I think that speaks to just the sensitivity and the passion that these guys have, right, with this saga and this IP. So
I think that's a great way of putting it. It's very tactful.
Yep. Yeah. All right, so let's get into, just quickly before we go, let's talk about some feedback. Our buddy over at Rebel Base Card says, catching up with the Cantina Cast, and I did really appreciate the discussion of The Last Jedi by Albert and Jonesy. Welcome back. On this episode, which is probably some of the best, frank, and honest discussion of the movie. This is the way discourse is done. So thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Greg, for doing that. And I'm glad we got a lot of great feedback, honestly, on that episode. And I mentioned this in Discord. That was so difficult to navigate without coming across as I think everything sucks or everything's horrible and everything's wonderful and it's infallible. I mean, it was just, we're trying to find that balance to be like, yeah, we like Star Wars. We actually like these movies, but we can still be critical of them too and be fair with that criticism. So hopefully we pulled that off. And then let's see. So over at UK Cosplay Dad says, love the show. Enjoyed the breakdown. Looking forward to future episodes on the conflict between the Mando Creed Guild Code and his past crew. We're going to get into all of that here in just a few episodes. Right. Personally hope that the helmet rule is linked to the Imperial demands during the past Purge surrender demand. It's an interesting thought. I don't know if they would be. I think that's just kind of, and I may be wrong. I mean, Jonesy, you tell me what you think, but I think that's just a long time standing legend, if you're a rule, bylaw, or whatever, of the Mandalorians. Although
Clone Wars.
I mean, they are half the time they don't have it on. But again, a lot of that, it's some of it's visual too, right? If you're doing a movie, obviously Mandalorian has his helmet on a lot here. The Clone Wars, they took an awful lot. And for a lot of that was so that we could see the eyes and we could see the mouths and see the facial expressions, right? Yeah. And Jon Favreau does a really good job of talking about this and that behind the scenes stuff that they do, where, or maybe I think it was actually Dave Filoni who said it. He did a lot of his filming, and it wasn't even until they got to the scene where, the offers being made and the bounties being made for the child to the Mandalorian, that he was actually filming somebody that had facial expressions, that he could something humanistic about it. And so I think a lot of it is just really that. I don't necessarily think it's just the fact that they can't wear helmets. I think they can't, but they have to be able to take the helmet off at time. It's the whole Kylo Ren thing, right? Is when he's got the helmet on, it's cool, but then you don't get to see Adam Driver and you don't get to see the facial expressions and all that. But I don't know. What are your thoughts here?
So I think it's back to basics for the Mandalorians, right? So they're underground. They only come up one at a time, which we'll learn in episode 3. They've got these rules now, right, that they're having to follow. And they're not necessarily the traditional rules that they've had historically. They've had to reshape and completely, reconfigure their culture and possibly even create a new culture as a result. And I have a feeling that the helmet and not removing it is probably a very old rule, from millennia ago or whatever it is, from the early days of the Mandalorian when they were formed for whatever reason. And now we're getting back to those moments, like we've lost our way kind of thing. And this is why, kind of like the Jedi to an extent, right? We've gone down this path and we've lost our way, and then something happens and the Great Purge type event happens. And now in order to rebuild, and you got to get back to the roots of it and get back, for the Jedi, what the Force really represents and what it means and how it doesn't belong, like Luke was saying in Last Jedi. And I think the Mandalorians have maybe a very similar type of approach here, where they've been decimated. They're underground. They're probably scattered. I can't imagine these are the only ones, but they're likely scattered, and they're having to reforge what they have.
Yeah. And we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of discussion. A lot of things are still probably going to happen with the Mandalorians. I think we're going to get into a lot of that, especially as, again, if my theory proves true, I think he's going to rebuild the Mandalorians, to some great height at some point in this series. But, throughout that, I think we'll get to see and learn more about the lore and the bylaws and the culture in a way that we hadn't seen before. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Okay, I think that's going to do it. I want to say, first off, thank you for everybody that joined on the live show. There's been a lot of great dialogue, a lot of great comments, great questions. Really appreciate that. It helps us. It gives us more to talk about, so we're not just sticking to our notes. So thank you for that. I think it makes for a better show. So if I didn't get a chance to call you out, I apologize. Just know that we do thank you quite a bit for doing that. Yep. If you want to leave us feedback, you can do so. We'd appreciate us. Reviews on iTunes are always helpful. Just because some numbnut put like a 1-star review in there and put a bunch of characters, and we think it's a child, not the child, but we're pretty sure it's a child that did this because it looks like it. But yeah, anything that we can do to help bring that score up after that 1-star review, that would be really helpful. So if you haven't had a chance and you want to show, your thanks to the show, please consider doing that. Otherwise, you guys can reach out to us at the Cantina Cast at all of the social media platforms. If you want to send us an email, you can send us an email to cantinacastfanmail@gmail.com. And you can send us a voicemail or a text message. We've not really plugged this in a while, but that is still available if you'd like to do that. That's 803-717-CAST. Mike, if you're still listening, put this in the show notes, please, so they know where to go. And then you can always follow us on Discord. Jonesy and I are in there. We reply and respond to as much as we can. So if you get a chance and Discord's your thing, come on in, say hello. We'd love to have you there as well.
Yeah, and please leave us comments on YouTube as well. And we do like constructive criticism, and we like your thoughts, especially if they're not the same. And we have a great time in Discord with that and being able to debate things. So it really is a lot of fun. So we appreciate all the different types of feedback we get. Okay, I think that's it. I think we've beat this. The Sin next week.
What's that?
The Sin next week.
Oh yeah, The Sin. Yeah, which is a very interesting episode.
It is. Yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, you're a wonderful human being.
Oh, what does that mean? I don't think you're being serious there, Jonesy.
I'm always serious.
All right.
I don't know how to joke.
We'll see you guys next week. Thank you all for being here.
Bye.
You're still listening? Wow. That's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.